Hello and welcome to City Beat. I am your host Greg from the Lewiston City Library. Joining me today is Dan Marsh, the Administrative Services Director and CFO for the City of Lewiston. Thanks for being on the show today, Dan.
Well, thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
Oh, I really appreciate you having here. So let's talk a little bit. It is kind of budget season this time of year, and so let's talk a little bit about budget. What does it mean? Kind of a little bit of background, and what most folks probably don't know.
Certainly. Like you said, it is budget season. And I think maybe that's where I'll start, is maybe what a lot of citizens aren't aware of is that for us, budgeting in some respects is year-round. We start with our planning processes. We have our year-end audits. But the city has performed and prepared a 5-year budget, really a prospective capital improvement plan and an operating budget for a 5-year basis. And every other year we update that. So, for example, we have numbers and budgets clear out to 2020. Now, what those are to be reflective of is the strategic planning. Where do you want to see your city in the next several years? So, and it's based upon feedback from citizens, citizen surveys, council direction, and that sort of thing. So our first actual real budget kickoff was on a Saturday in February this year, where department managers met with councilors and talked about the needs and again, where we envision our departments over the next year. From there, the 5-year budget, we actually prepare a 2-year budget. By state law, you can only approve 1 year at a time. So 2015, the fiscal year we're working on right now, was put in draft form last year. So it's referred to as the second year of the 2-year budget. So when we then jumpstart the number process, which, by the way, tends to get a lot of attention, especially as you get down to the very end, and that is the number moving. Percentage here, numbers, impacts, and effects, which is all extremely important. But I try to remind our staff and counselors and the public that we really need to keep our eye on service delivery, and what are the objectives we want to achieve. So as we launched into this season, this was the second year of a 2-year budget, and it was balanced, but it did have a 3% tax increase. So what we've been spending a lot of time over the last couple of months is seeing if we can get that 3% reduced down. So,
well, that sounds like a big process. And you mentioned fiscal year. Now, I know what that is, but for folks who may not know, you hear that term in different aspects. So could you maybe just talk to that just a little bit?
Certainly.
For folks who have, maybe just get confused
Sure.
that with the Gregorian calendar or something.
That's a great question, Greg. It really is. As individuals, we all think in terms of calendar year. January 1, December 31st. A lot of corporations and businesses may be incorporated that as well. But for governments in state of Idaho, for local governments, it is October 1st would be your first day of the new year, and September 30th is your last day of the year. Ironically, the state of Idaho, the state government, is a June 30. And I think a lot of it has to do with the timing and distribution of revenues as they flow from the state to the cities. So we will wrap up our FY, or fiscal year 14, on September 30th and launch the new year October 1st. Some due dates, we're approaching our last reading of the budget, and then we need to certify and submit that to Nez Perce County, and then on to the State Tax Commission, so that we'll be ready to go and have funds in the coffer for the next year.
Oh, wow. And, it really is a big process, and it sounds like a really big process. And a lot of people work really hard to make this process as smooth as possible. So I really appreciate, all the hard work that you guys do behind the scenes that no one really gets to see. So kind of along those lines, what does a day in the life of Dan Marsh look like, throughout the year?
Well, it's got its peaks, not too many valleys. We think it's a pendulum, like I'd mentioned earlier, where you work all year on your financials, and we take a lot of pride in that. In fact, for 22 consecutive years, we've been recognized nationally for transparency and accurate reporting. So that makes us feel really good. I've got a great staff, a tremendous staff, and so we then work towards our budget, which is on the heels of planning, and then you have your audit, and then that pendulum, that cycle begins all over again. My title is Administrative Services Director, so really it's where the support functions accrue, if you will, the pit crews for all the city functions. So in that includes Information Technology Division, the Fleet Division, which provides all the vehicles and equipment for the city, Human Resources, Finance that we've been spending most of our time on, and Purchasing. And then in addition to that, it's just assisting departments, assisting Mr. Bennett, our city manager, where I can.
Wow. Big job.
Well, I take it very seriously, and again, without the team, it just takes a team.
Oh yeah,
So
well, and it's a testament to 22 years of national recognition. I think shows that the team is doing a great job overall.
Yeah, we're really proud of that, and again, back on the budget piece, a lot of folks focus in on the taxes, and it's important, but we really try to hopefully not lose sight of the fact that we're here for service delivery. We can always improve. A community restroom can always look a little better. Lawns can be kept a little, so there's always things we can do to improve on that. On the tax note, though, there's a term called foregone taxes. And what that means is that's taxes that the city has not taken that could have taken. So by law, state law, we can increase taxes from one year to the next up to 3%. Each year you don't take the 3%, it's a paper number that's kept track of. And to me, I think it's a testament of the conservatism of our council and our community. But the City of Lewiston is one of the highest in the state with those foregone taxes not taken and we could have taken. In fact, it's $2.2 million.
Wow.
And the last I looked, I believe we're the third highest in the state. So again, that's that portion below 3% that we try to take. Now, it only has a partial impact on the levy rate. That's what tends to get a lot of the attention. But in order to get to a levy rate, the budget is incorporated with the assessed values, the market values of the community. And we and you and average citizens, we don't have any impact on that. That's just really has to do with what's going on in the markets, expansion, growth. But the more our market value grows, the lower that rate is, and the rate is what's multiplied times an individual's property. But what we have control of is what we do request. And so that's where we're at this year. Like I mentioned, we started at a 3%. We've already reduced it to 1%. And as of just this morning, Mr. Ben and I are working for other ways to try to present to council an even zero budget.
Wow, that'd be great. And then that would just add to that foregone taxes coffer as well, or just
That's right.
the number that's just showing that we're really trying to support our citizens by not raising taxes and saving that amount of money.
Right, that's exactly right. If I might, let me take a little bit of time. A lot of attention has got to this 4.8% that's been published. The 4.8 is comprised of two components, and that's the increase. And we're trying to be ultra transparent in terms of how do you arrive at this year's budget. Well, in that 4.8%, 1.8 of it comes from the state's general coffers. It's replacement money for personal property tax that the city and other local governments aren't able to receive this year. So the way the math works out, it comes to 4.8 when you combine it with the 3% that we started with. Mm-hmm. But it's important that citizens know that 1.8 would come from the state. It does not get passed. It's not taxed to the local citizens. So back to the 3%, I mentioned to you, Mr. Ben and I will have it, we believe, to zero or close to it. Then it's up to council to select additional enhancements or projects, and there's a list of about 8 items that can then build us back towards the 3%. For example, our streets. There is a proposal to put all the additional state money, $290,000 to streets, $100,000 to go towards the community park to continue with the investments there. A public information officer. There's been suggested that we need more education and then also some additional assistance in the attorney's office. There is money slated for a E91 server in the police department, safety equipment in the fire department. The exhaust from engines and whatnot within the closed department get filtered through the living quarters and the offices. Oh, wow. And so there's some equipment you can attach to the exhaust systems and extract that. So been talking for a while, but I wanted to kind of pull that all together. 4.8, 1.8 from the state. We think we have the base budget close to zero. Then if council chooses to arc that up for those projects I just mentioned, then they can do that.
Oh, wow. Wow. So let's look at some, unless you have anything else to add to the current budget, I was just thinking of some big budget questions
sure.
for just overall, for any city, anywhere. And like I said, as an average citizen, I don't know a whole lot about the entire process and things. So so I kind of did my own research online about what are some good questions to ask for a city in the budget planning process. And so one of them was, what are the biggest priorities and obligations? So like City of Lewiston specifically, what are our biggest obligations and priorities?
I would say without question public safety. And public safety is, of course, police and fire as you think about it, but it's more than that. It's your water, to make sure you have safe water. A lot of money is invested in our water plant. It's old, but still's working great. But in terms of the turbidity levels and the correct chemicals, there is getting rid of the wastewater, your garbage. So when I think of public safety, I want to make sure I include those three utility pieces.
Oh, absolutely.
The recycling function, you could say is optional, but again, that's all public safety. But our police and fire, year in, year out, our crime statistics are at or below average. We just have a very top-notch department in terms of the fire department, where we provide an ambulance service as well. So that to me is first and foremost. Then you have your support functions like my office and the attorney's office, our community development department. We are on a tremendous run right now, and I'd be remiss, Greg, if I didn't put a plug in and put my old cheerleader hat on, and I'm happy to do that. But we are in a momentum right now, and I don't want that to be lost with the citizens. You can look back over, say, the prior 35 years, and we're stagnant growth. Maybe a little blip here and there, but by and large, we're about a 1% increase. We're experiencing some tremendous increases in our building department. Last year, there was a $16 million in new building request. That was a record. We think we might match that this year.
Oh, wow.
So, and I don't want to make this interview all about urban renewal, but urban renewal as a tool allows us to help facilitate that momentum. So we're in this pretty nice little bubble here. It won't last forever. It's just like things that are most cyclical, wheat prices or sports teams.
Exactly.
And we're the same. I don't know, 2, 3 years, 4 years, maybe longer, but I really feel it's important for us to, I think we're conscientious with the numbers. I know we are. Our overall budget's only up 1%. But at the same time, we need to have a right balance of priming that pump, because we've got a number of interested businesses now that are hearing about Lewiston and want to come to town. And the new hotel that's going to open up next year already across from the cinema. So lots going on. So those are our priorities, to try to keep all that in balance, but always keep our eye on the target, and that's public safety, assistance with community development growth, and those kinds of things.
Oh, that's great. And I really appreciate how you mentioned, the importance of fresh water for citizens as part of public safety. Not everyone realizes that. Like you mentioned, everyone knows about the police and the fire and what the great job they do, but
right.
The men and women who work in making sure our water is clean is very important.
And I got to put a plug in for our library. Holy smokes, Greg! I know that's where you work.
Yeah, it's a beautiful building and a testament to a lot of folks' hard work over a long time.
And it just didn't happen, like you said, it didn't happen overnight. It's kind of the pay-as-you-go method, and that's somewhat we're doing with the community park. 100,000 here, maybe 100,000 there, and do a lot of hard work, a lot of folks. But what a gem!
Oh, absolutely!
What a gem in our community. So
it's been great. And okay, so we talked a little bit about this momentum. So where are we trying to go? This is back to one of those research questions I mentioned. Where for a medium-sized city by Idaho standards or national standards, where are we trying to go into the future?
Well, that's also a good question, and that's, I think, where maybe one of the number one things our city council needs to work with staff to make sure, what are those goals and objectives. I take from that, in my opinion, is infrastructure. That's why you see the push towards streets, making sure our utility lines are updated and proper. We have some lines that are well over 100 years downtown that need updated. So in order to bring more jobs, which will bring more growth to the economy, lower our overall taxes because you have more people coming to the party to pay the freight, so to speak, that analogy.
Absolutely.
So I believe it's in the infrastructure. We are behind, if you will, in terms of some of our street improvements, not drastically so, but we need to make some decisions to move towards improving some of our street enhancements, improvements. And I think I'm confident that that'll happen. There's already a 20-year street improvement plan in place. We just need to work on the funding. More than anything, it's the funding.
Yeah, and that's usually how it kind of has to happen. So, Is there anything else you'd like to add today that we didn't get a chance to talk about? Other than that, I've got one last question for you.
Well, I think we just, to summarize, I think we have a very responsible budget.
Absolutely.
It maintains the services that we spoke of. Overall, the budget is approximately almost $59 million, which is just 1% over the prior year. At the tax rate, it's really a 3% to the citizens and 0% increase if council so chooses. I don't think we'll end up there. There are some really good projects that need to be looked at. So I think it's responsible. Even at a 3% increase would only be a $1 tax increase per month for a citizen with $100,000 taxable property. So I think it's responsible. I think there's also some areas in there that will enhance our infrastructure. So yeah, I think we're on track, and I put all that credit back to the hard work and the planning of our staff.
Absolutely. And with that, we mentioned how busy you are and how big the scope is. What is your favorite part of your job?
Working with citizens, even if it's a complaint, if you will, but it's taking the suggestion from the citizen, incorporating that with our apartment managers and staff, and see what we can do to fix it. We can't fix all problems, especially if it's a parking ticket to somebody. They deserved it, they earned it.
Exactly.
But it's taking that and trying to make a positive from a concern. And then lastly, I would put in that same vein is the variety. As you know, the city has a golf course to a cemetery to streets to sewer. Yeah. So the variety keeps things very interesting.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks again for being on the show today, Dan. I really appreciated talking with you and having you here today.
You're welcome.
You'll have to come back again soon. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate that.
All right.
And on behalf of my guest, Dan Marsh, and the rest of us here at City Bait, we hope you have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next time.